Alright, welcome back to another episode of Fugue State, where we discuss modern thoughts and recapitulations of Western art music. Today we will interview a well-known classical guitarist, Anthony Stefani.
Anthony is an experienced guitarist who is classically trained at the Community Division of DePaul School of Music. We believe that he can provide interesting insights into the state of Western art music today and how it is performed, perceived, and conveyed.
Hello, Mr. Stefani. How are you doing today? Are you ready to talk about some music?
I'm very ready to talk about some music, and thank you for the kind introduction. That's very sweet. I don't know if I'd call myself well-known, but I appreciate that.
Wonderful.
Great. To start us off, we wanted to ask you about your recent musical endeavors. We heard that you performed in a video game ensemble.
Yes.
What is that like, and do you enjoy it?
Yeah, so it's a really fun experience. There are a lot of overlaps between film scores, music ensemble scores just for like ordinary classical music, and video game music. So they draw from a lot of similar inspirations. Most of them tend to be orchestrally focused, so you'll have a lot of the same interplays between the strings, the woodwinds. You'll see a lot of patterns emerge in them that are quite similar. You do get a little more diversity of instrumentation in soundtracks than considering like older classical music. So case in point, electric guitar is something you'll frequently see paired together with like a full orchestra or a wind ensemble inside of video game music, or for just like show or movie soundtracks. That's not something obviously you're going to see in a lot of classical music just because the electric guitar wasn't invented back then. But I mean, it is a well-known joke that if Beethoven or Bach had had access to the electric guitar, they would have used it in it primarily. Which,
Yeah.
So, as a guitar player, do you mostly play electric guitar, and is that what you use to play both classical and your video game music, or is it generally two separate instruments?
Those are two very separate instruments. Main difference between them, so a classical guitar is, to start with, hollow body, nylon strings. That's basically how you would think of it. The shape of it's also different from electric guitars. The way a classical guitar sounds tends to be a lot warmer. Another key difference is electric guitars, while they can emit sound while not plugged in, that's not what they're designed to do. So you'll see things that are called solid body electric guitars. They'll look like ordinary guitars, but you won't have that like body with the sound hole, you won't have that cavity inside. In classical guitars, acoustic guitars, that's what gives you your amplification, that's what gives you your sound, that's what gives you your resonance. In electric guitars, what happens is you have metal strings, and your metal strings, when you pluck them, induces, and I'm not kidding here, this is just like straight physics, it induces an oscillating electromagnetic field, which is picked up on by two things called pickups. And the pickups, when you plug in your guitar, you get power to your electric guitar, the pickups generate a magnetic field, and when you pluck metal strings, that induces a resonance in the field, and that transfers back through your plug-in to your amp, where it's then switched back into sound.
Wow. I
primarily use classical. I enjoy playing electric, but classical is my forte. Also, some people do this. Let me go a little off. Some people play electric guitars using just their fingers. I'm a fingerstyle guitarist, so that means I prefer to play just using my fingers and not a pick. More frequently with electric guitars, you will see pick usage. I'm not as good with a pick. I can play with one. But it's a very different skill that I've not really bothered to pick up yet, so I greatly prefer classical.
I've seen my brother play with one of those guitars that's an acoustic guitar and has a hollow inside, but also you can plug in. Is that just like an amplified acoustic guitar?
Yeah, well, I have one of those too. They're called, they're just hollow body electrics. They function basically the same way as an ordinary electric guitar. They just also have that sound hole, so they do emit sounds when they're not plugged in.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
How does playing guitar coincide with playing along with an orchestra? Because in Western art music, we haven't seen a lot of usage of guitar.
Okay, so they're very different. Well, from a performer's experience, they feel very different. Mm-hmm. When you're playing solo classical guitar, you're not really indebted is the word I want to use. You don't have to worry about anyone other than yourself while you're playing solo classical guitar. Which means I can put in all the embellishments I want. I can like read the audience a little bit, figure out like what type they like more, figure out how I'm feeling at the time, change how I play something, change the speed I play something. You see this a lot. There's a lot of room for artistic interpretation in solo classical guitar. A little bit less so when you're playing with an orchestra. In fact, a lot less so, because now you're indebted to your conductor, you're indebted to your fellow musicians. You have to be locked into what they're doing, you have to be listening to them, and you have to make sure above all that you're keeping the rhythm. You can speed up and slow down as you want if you're playing solo, add all the artistic embellishments you want. Playing with a group, you have to be locked in, you can't change from the plan.
All right. Interesting.
So I guess moving on to like the actual music. So when you play like more, unusual music for someone like a classical solo guitarist, do you think of that music differently? Do you still approach it in the same way, or is it a completely different thing? And we in our class we've been talking a lot about like avant-garde music. Would you even consider like video game music that?
Okay, define unusual and define avant-garde, because there's a large mixture there that I'm not quite sure what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I guess unusual is whatever you want to interpret it as, but avant-garde is experimentalist is the way we've been describing it. Is there a lot of improvisation involved? If we're getting into the specific of what we were talking about, like from the improvisational experimental standpoint, how much can you add? So I know that you said that specifically the guitar, even in classical music, you're able to interpret a lot more and play with the audience's reaction, which is something like as a classical pianist myself, I cannot do. I don't really like see how their audience is reacting because it is more of a classical instrument that is typically used as a solo classical.
Well, I should specify a little more. The type of guitar I play most often it's a type of classical, but it's mostly like Spanish and Latin American guitar.
Yeah.
So a lot of this comes from, I'll be honest, I find some, I have a piece I really like to play, which is definitely classical. Prelude to Bach's Cello Suite. Love that song. Wonderful. Not usually the time period I play from. A lot of the guitar I play is from like 1800s, 1900s. There's been a lot of really good, you would call them like classical guitarists, but they play like Spanish flamenco style guitar.
Yeah.
That tends to be what I like specifically play. Avant-garde in reference to solo guitar performance tends to mean stranger techniques and less dedicated rhythm. So the easiest thing I guess I would think of as out of the ordinary pieces, your time signatures get weird. That's the quickest thing I can think of.
We've seen that.
Not out of the usual in jazz that often, but I'm talking like truly bizarre time signatures. Also, you'll start seeing less adherence to key signatures. You'll start seeing higher switches. It can often focus less on being melodic and more about providing an unsettling feeling. I find frequently. There's a song by Leo Brouwer, which I looked into playing once, called, I want to say it's called Spiral. Like 8-minute long piece. Weird time signature. It uses this very strange technique. A lot of the notes are on classical guitar, they're called artificial harmonics. There are resonance points on classical guitar strings where you can just kind of hover your finger over them and then you can play the string and it'll cause this really clear like bell note to ring out. Artificial harmonics is when you change the length of the string by like fretting it and then you do it with one hand. So you pluck it and you hit the harmonic with the same hand. It's a piece that's basically built entirely around, God, if I'm remembering the piece right, it's built entirely around rhythmic banging on your guitar coinciding with you hitting these artificial harmonics.
Okay.
It doesn't sound anywhere near as melodic as what you would call most classical guitar pieces. That would be the first thing I would think of. You're not adhering to key signatures as much, or if you are, you could not adhering. Your key signatures are weird. You're not using 4/4, you're not using 3/4, you're not using like 9/8, you're not in waltz time, you're in like 13/12, you're in one of these strange things.
Yeah.
And then you're using techniques that are not ordinarily associated with the guitar. Those would be my two thoughts.
Okay.
Interesting. So I was really interested, you talked about playing Bach as well as being in the video game ensemble. And usually when I think of like video game music, it's like the background to the game.
Yeah.
It's not the focus of the music. The music is not the focus itself.
Yeah.
While with Bach, he really wanted the music itself to be the focus.
Yes, that's a very good point. It really depends on what you're going for. You do always have to take video game music in the context of where it's supposed to be, which is in a game. Some of the pieces' compositions doesn't really quite reflect that as much. Like there are a bunch of these pieces, piece from a video game called Nier, pieces called Grandma. It's this really elegant piano line that's just played beautifully. It sounds like it could have been composed in like 1700s, 1600s. They're not always designed to be the focus, but sometimes it feels like that doesn't necessarily matter, because when you're playing the game, there's obviously something else that's drawing your attention more. So frequently, I'm not sure how much they're worrying about with some of these pieces. Oh, we're worried it's going to draw their attention away. That's fairly like, I don't think that's a fairly usual concern for a composer in video game music to have. And also, sometimes you really do want that music to just hit really hard. I mean, if you're going for a boss battle, like those things are all like operatic pieces.
Geometry Dash.
Yeah.
Geometry Dash is interesting. Geometry Dash is a weird case of electronic music. I do like Geometry Dash music. It's very
Have
fun.
you played it?
Well, yeah, but Geometry Dash has this added extra thing, which is Geometry Dash is going for a unification of rhythm with your gameplay.
Yeah.
So a lot of those songs actually hit with the inputs you're hitting.
Yes.
That's another thing that games play with that, classical music kind of can't. It's very good at pairing actions that you're taking to the music you're listening to.
Yes.
There's a bunch of games that actually kind of do this. Nier, which I mentioned earlier, has a boss fight with an opera singer, and canonically she's supposed to be singing the song you're hearing while you're playing it. So her attacks are all in time with the music. She lets out like massive laser beams when it crescendos. She lets out like projectile attacks as the bells chime in the song. You can do a lot of things where you unify what you're seeing and what you're hearing with video game music.
Yeah.
Which are very effective.
Yes. Cynthia's theme from Pokemon.
Yeah.
It has like difference for like when it's opening, and that also is one that's just meant to hit.
Yeah, like that. Yeah.
You also performed at the French restaurant Le Sud. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, Le Sud. It's a French restaurant by my house. Best paying job I've ever had. Love that job.
How would you play for an audience there that is there to enjoy their meal versus an audience that's there to see you perform?
That's a good question. I tend to be less dramatic with it. Less dramatic, turn down your amp. I was obviously playing with classical guitar, but I have a little pickup that you can put on a classical guitar. It's an audio mic, but basically I hooked that up to the restaurant sound system. And that worked fine with their speakers, so that's what I was doing. Turn down, less drama, but there would be times where sometimes like people would kind of like lock into my music, and I would notice that, and if I saw them like visibly lock in, then I would like play to their reactions a little more, and then I'd make it a little more dramatic. So I mean, just basically being aware of my surroundings, seeing what people around me are doing, and then altering how I'm playing compared to that. If I notice people are like in a deep conversation, I'll like start playing like a little quieter, stuff like that.
Did you ever play with like other people, like a mini ensemble?
At the restaurant?
Yeah.
No, it was just me.
Solo?
Yeah.
Very cool.
Just me.
Very cool. So I noticed that you mentioned playing Bach's First Cello Suite.
Yes.
And that is a piece that we spent a lot of time on in class.
Yeah.
So how was the experience playing that for guitar? That's like a very, very classical cello, specifically for a cello. So how did you feel about that turning into more of a guitar piece?
Oh, that one is a really classical cello piece, but also it made the jump to guitar like a really long time ago. You can take a lot of songs that were written for string instruments that aren't the guitar and bring them to the guitar very easily, because the guitar is very versatile. Something the guitar can do that a lot of other instruments struggle with, and I'll use the cello suite as an example. If you listen to the entire cello suite, you have the cellos doing the main line, and then you'll have bass cellos hitting the bass notes. Ordinarily how that piece goes. What you do for guitar, well, this is a lot easier on guitar, because now I don't need a bass cellist to hit the bass notes. I can just straight up play the melodic line that the ordinary cellos are playing. And then what you have to do, the song's in, I think, D, you have to take your low E string, you tune it into drop D, so you make it a whole note lower than usual, and all of a sudden you have your bass notes. So you can play the bass part and the melodic line at the same time. It's not an easy piece, but like it's very much within the realm of things that the guitar is good at doing. The sound is correct for it. The warm cello sound is nice. In the original performance of it, it tends to be very mathematical. It's very on point continuously.
Just like Bach always is.
Just like Bach always is. This is something I frequently play with a little bit when I play it.
Yeah.
There are a lot of places where I embellish or I slow down that I probably Bach would not approve of, but I like how it sounds. But yeah, it's within the realm of the guitar. The sound is correct for it. It's not it doesn't use so many instruments that you're losing something just by trying to condense all those instruments to guitar.
Yeah.
And those are the main things. Yeah.
So I guess you maybe partially already answered that question, but when playing like an older work like that, how do you balance like historical accuracy with the modern conceptions of that piece? And do you okay, so it sounds like you play around with it a lot.
I play around with it a lot. I'm helped a little bit by the pieces I enjoy playing most ordinarily tend to be pieces which don't have these really set, like, rigorous classical standards for, oh, you're supposed to play it this way or this way. If you go up and, like, famous classical guitar song, Capriccio or Op by Torrego. Torrego's like, he's known as the godfather of classical guitar. I love this guy. There are as many different, like, ways to perform Capriccio Arab as there are people who have performed it. There are ways that are more common, but it's completely reasonable, I think, for guitarists to disagree on how they best like to hear that song. And you just have you have quite a lot of room for interpretation on solo guitar. And my classical guitar teacher was very, very, like, rigorous and by the book. And he was an incredibly good guitarist. But sometimes I felt like he missed a little something by never putting his own spin on it. Because I feel like it's important that if you're keeping the music relevant, you shouldn't just be playing what they wanted you to play. That was a few hundred years ago. That was however many years ago. You're a different person. You're a different performer. You're going to feel the music differently. You should play it a little differently, you know?
Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah.
That's what makes us different from, like, a recording of the piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get a little more quality live, and you'll never quite play it the same way twice.
That's an excellent point. Excellent. Are you familiar with the terms absolute music and program music?
I am not familiar with it.
Okay, so absolute music is, I believe Bach was a huge fan of this. It's enjoying the music, listening to the music, and the music is a standalone on its own.
Okay.
It conveys the entire story within the music.
Yeah.
Program music is the music's supposed to mirror a story or outside other work of literature.
Yeah.
So, like, music follows like a poem.
Yeah. I like absolute. Usually when I'm listening to music, I'm focusing on the song as like a self-contained work. Obviously, this isn't always the case. I love video game music, and obviously that's the other type. You're accompanying it in the context of an outside story. I think it is very important that music tell a story. It's not always necessary. There are some songs I listen to that don't, but they should always be trying to convey something. I do like music better when it can stand alone, I tend to think. But in the case of, like, video game music, a lot of those pieces, you might interpret them differently if you don't know the game, but they still can stand alone perfectly fine. Like, you can pull emotional arcs out of them, you can pull tones, you can pull themes of a type, you can pull moods.
Yeah.
So I think I prefer absolute, but I'm not always sure that there's as big a difference between those two as that dichotomy might make it sound.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that you say that there's, like, not a huge difference between, because when looking through your works, the pieces Una de
Novembre.
Yes,
Yeah.
and La Cathedral.
Yeah.
Both of those would be considered, I would consider program music because they have associated stories with them.
Yeah, so Cathedral's a good one. How much did you read about the story of Cathedral?
Not that much. I did not go that deep.
Basic story of Cathedral. I'm just going to call it Cathedral so I don't say La Cathedral every 5 seconds because my accent is dog water.
Yeah.
The story of Cathedral is basically Mangor went to a church and he was having a very, like, religious, like, very calm, peaceful experience in the church. And that's the first movement of Cathedral. It's very calming. It's a medium tempo, and then it's consistent. It's very mathematical. It doesn't switch up its pattern at all. It's basically your right hand as a guitarist is doing the same thing the entire piece.
Yeah.
Your left hand is basically switching between a bunch of different chord structures. So it's like you'll spend a measure in this chord position. You'll switch to this position. You'll switch to this position. Your hand is doing the same thing the entire time. Very calming, very soothing. You tend to play it a little more sweetly, but you play it consistently, you play it calm. Second act switches up to, like, this epiphany he has mid-church. It is slower than the first half. It sounds more like bells. That was the other point of the first movement. It was supposed to sound a little bit like the bells of the church. Second movement, he switches up. to this more like ponderous, slower melody, lots of block chords. He's not arpeggiating anymore. But he'll hit a block chord and then he'll pluck like 3 individual notes and then he'll hit another block chord. So it's this like kind of like very solemn, very step by step. You hit something at the start of each measure and then you give like a ponderous few like wistful follow-up notes. Not as rhythmically consistent. You can play this in a bunch of different ways. You can play around with it. It'll sound good anyway. This is a much slower. And then you hit the third part of the piece. And the third part of the piece is he leaves the church after this religious experience and he goes onto the streets of the busy city. And it completely switches up. You get a little bit of the sense of what he was going for even in Act 1, even in the first part of the piece. It again is very mathematical, it's very consistent, only this time you've doubled the tempo, you're no longer doing block chords, you are basically just going ham with your left hand for the next 4 minutes and 30 seconds.
Okay.
Anyone who's ever played this piece will tell you that learning it is an exercise in knowing what it's like to have your forearm turned into like steel. Because every time I finish playing this piece, this entire thing is like seized up to no end.
Yeah.
Because it's 4 minutes and 30 seconds if you're playing 16th notes at like 120 BPM. It's so much fun. It is so hard on your arm. There's hammer-ons every measure. But the point is, it's just going wild in the third half. So, as you said, it tells a very consistent story. He starts in this church. He has this religious experience. He goes back into the chaos in the city. It's nice. It follows the logic of the story. Does knowing the story add something to it? It adds context. I don't think you appreciate the piece any less for not knowing it. I think the piece still stands well on its own. But in this case, I think you're probably right. This one probably does tend a little more towards having a story and context. And now that you've pointed it out, I always tell the story before I perform it every time.
Yeah.
So obviously, I think you're right in this case. That is definitely more so.
Okay.
I guess talking about a few more themes in like your repertoire. You've played a lot of pieces with not like Western art music traditions.
Yeah.
And how does that coincide with like your classical training and whether that's actually like part of your classical training and part of the classical repertoire that you were taught as a classically trained musician in today's world?
The most important thing you pick up from like being classically trained is just technique.
Yeah.
I was never a good enough student to have really internalized that, oh, you should play it as the author intended type thing.
Yeah.
I'm far less mathematical and like rigorous than some of my classical guitar peers are. I like playing around with the music way too much to have really internalized any of that. And my guitar teacher was always a little annoyed at me about this. He really wanted like to teach me just like the main things, and I always bring him like new things. But I mean, which pieces specifically are you talking about being outside like Western art?
Think like Malagueña and like Danza dell'Altipiano. Like, things like
Okay, I mean they're different from like classical guitar music in that less rhythmic adhesion to following a strict like tempo, less rhythmic adhesion to staying in 4/4. I'm gonna be so honest. I always just find these pieces way more interesting than a bunch of classical guitar stuff. There's a lot of stuff in classical guitar where I'm like, yeah, I can really appreciate this. I can appreciate the skill that went into this. A lot of it tends to be kind of boring in my opinion, which is why I got into playing a lot of this like Spanish style stuff, Latin American music. There's far more interesting key switches. It's also just a lot more fun to play. There's more techniques in there.
Yeah.
And as I said, you get to play around with it. It's much more fun.
Yeah. You mentioned a lot of like the techniques, but like also versus just playing it not mathematically how they recommended, like more emotionally.
Yeah.
And you've also played in a lot of places that demand like high like virtuosity and like high skill.
Yeah.
And so like what does being a good guitarist mean? Is that balance more like technical or balance more musicality and emotion?
Oh, it changes based on the context. I mean, if like we're talking, I did the school musical at Lane Tech, my high school. Matilda. We had the like original professional score for Matilda, the musical. I basically didn't play electric guitar before that, and I didn't know how to like play with a pick that well. So over the course of like 4 months, I had to teach myself how to like read. Like, I can read sheet music, but I can't. Before then, I couldn't like. If you told me like G minor 7, I would have no idea what to do.
Yeah.
And honestly, I kind of forgot since then, so I still have no idea what to do if you tell me that. You give me a sheet full of notes and I'll be fine. But I had not internalized this method of like reading guitar But that was a slight tangent.
No, I
if
feel
you're-
that.
Yeah.
as a pianist, like as a classical pianist, I went to jazz band.
Yeah.
Same exact story. They were like, play a G7.
I'm like, I don't know what
I'm
you
like,
want.
can
Can you write that
show
out
it
for
to
me?
me? Yeah, can you show it to me?
So real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
But
Sorry.
no, thank you. What was I saying? If you're playing in a band, it's very important to be in sync with people. It's very important to be on tempo. It's very important to be listening to your conductor. Three most important things. If you're playing solo, you have to have the technical capability to play the piece. But honestly, I've always, my guitar teacher would be really angry at me for saying this. I've always been of the opinion that the most important thing is that your audience enjoys the piece. The audience will forgive a lot of missteps in terms of it not being accurate. Let's say I'm playing a really complicated piece, and there's one section where you're supposed to like do this really long reach, and it's super hard, and it would interrupt the flow of my piece to do that, and it would take a lot of effort for me to do that. A lot of classical guitarists will say you should put the effort into learning that, you should do that, you should get that one note, you should get the entire thing completely right before you perform the piece. I am definitively guilty of like changing my pieces so that I can play them in a way that will sound better coming from me because I might not currently have the ability to play them as written. Obviously, this is, people would say not sticking to the original view of the piece, but I think if your audience enjoys it, if they get the general idea, if they get what you are trying to communicate, if they get what you're trying to say, if they get your emotion, I think that is more important than sticking verbatim to the piece itself. A lot of guitarists would probably disagree with me on this, though.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a few really fun questions.
Hell yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the first fun question,
Mm-hmm.
one that you have suggested.
Yeah.
What is your opinion on AI in art? AI in art, specifically in music, but also feel free to delve into other arts. How do you think it plays into the creativity of art and whether it, so the way I think of it is that humans also work off of other humans when creating even new or brand new things, right? And a lot of the problems with AI is that it works from an existing like repertoire of like human art. But yet it does always seem to be less creative than humans can possibly be. So I guess go for it.
Okay, here's my main problem with AI. The plagiarism part, which you mentioned basically, is fairly unoriginal. That is a problem. But as you also mentioned, a lot of music is derivative.
Yeah.
It being derivative is not my main problem with AI. My main problem with AI is it takes any part of the creativity work out of a lot of this music stuff. The point of music, in my opinion, is you are trying to communicate an emotion, a feeling you had. You're trying to communicate an idea you had. To some extent, I care more about that idea having actually come from you than whether or not I enjoy the piece.
Okay.
There are a lot of music pieces out there where I'm like, I don't particularly like this piece, but I do appreciate how much thought went into this, how much effort went into this. You went through the creative process of trying to say to something, and I think that's wonderful inherently.
Yeah.
I don't trust AI to say anything emotional. I don't trust AI to say anything about the human condition. I don't trust it to know what a theme is, because it's math. It's generating something based off a set of numbers. If a human wants to generate something based off a set of numbers, there is mathematical music. I think that's different. I think that's fine. Some guy made the number pi into a song. I think that's a wonderful use of human creativity because he had the thought, what does math sound like? And he wanted to transfer that information to people.
Yeah.
What did it sound like?
It sounded pretty good. I mean, he put it in a key, he assigned each digit to one of the notes in the key, and then he did like a bass accompaniment. It was nice. It was a pretty nice sounding piece, honestly. But I feel like AI just gets around the point of creating art. You're creating art to like speak to your fellow person. AI is not a fellow person. Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
You're robbing yourself by using AI as an art creation tool.
So,
And also you're robbing your fellow man because of the plagiarism issue, but honestly.
Partially, it sounds like you're very much on the side of program music because you keep saying that music should represent like at least some specific thing, like an emotion or maybe not exactly a story, but it should convey something from one human to another.
Yeah.
Do you think that conveying of one thing to another needs to be accurate? As in, like, do you think that the emotion, say, Bach felt when writing his piece should be the same emotion that I feel? Or do you think that music should be like more interpretive?
Should? No. I feel like it's important that he was trying to say something, and when you're trying to say something, I think people will pick up more on what you're trying to say, but if it means something different to you, that's completely fine.
Okay.
Even if he he could have completely said something that you pick up on that maybe he didn't realize he was saying while he wrote it. If you feel it differently, that's completely fine. That's wonderful. It was still something made by a human that has human characteristics, emotions, and feelings encoded in it. If you give it an alternative meaning, that's completely fine.
Okay.
The problem I find with AI music and AI art in general, it's fundamentally not human, and that bothers me a lot.
Yeah.
That just bothers me to no end. And you also have the point, which is like, creating art is a very nice, wonderful, cathartic process.
Yeah.
Why are you wrapping yourself by telling the computer programs to do that? What, we're having our computers do the fun parts of being alive, and we're having us do the stupid parts of it? No.
Yeah, so do you think art is defined by the creative process rather than the end result?
Yes, because I wouldn't separate the two. I mean, the creative process leads you to the end result. The AI is taking out the creative process. I wouldn't call the end result art even.
Okay. What do you think of pieces that are incredibly weird, such as by those of John Cage? Have you?
Like 4 minutes, 32 seconds?
Yeah, 4:33.
I think that's a cool piece. I like it. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
I think that I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, that was a very controversial piece. I think that's a cool idea. He had a cool idea. He did it. It inspired discussion, so obviously, like, he said something
worked. Yeah.
Something worked. I think the worst type of art is the kind that doesn't make you feel anything or make you think.
Do you think a piece like that is the creative process without the end result, or is it like the end result without the creative process?
I think there was a creative process involved in that. It just looked way different than what you would normally see in a piece.
Is there an end result though?
Yeah, the end result was nothing. Yeah. And I think that's kind of cool. He went through a creative process, which is not what we would expect, and then he created nothing.
Very cool.
And it was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Have you heard of his piece? I think it's like Season of Changes. It's like completely random.
Season of Change. I haven't.
What he did is he got this from like an Eastern Chinese tradition.
Yeah.
And he would flip 3 coins.
Okay.
And based on what he got, that would correspond to a value. And he just made it. He had a table set of like 32 just like random like sets of notes in a pattern. And he'd flip a coin, and based on just like the random probability, that would make the music.
Yeah.
And if you listen to it, it just sounds so random. It's like it's not melodic. It doesn't. It sounds like more random than a baby banging on a keyboard.
I would also. I like that as well. He had an idea. He did a thing. The thing was unique. Fundamentally, that's like an early version of the pi thing we were talking about.
Yeah.
He's encoding math and probability into music. That's cool.
So it's still human in
That's-
that respect.
it's
even
still
though
human.
you were talking about how like math is like anti-music.
Yeah.
But it's a human thing to
Sorry,
come up with.
math is. What did you say about math being anti-music?
Well, I might be twisting your words a little bit. But you were like that AI is a math model, and that's what spits out music, and that's something you seem to have had an issue with. Right?
Okay, I have an issue with it in terms of at no point in that process is an emotion involved.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's a ton of math in music, obviously. I mean, you as a pianist.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say math is anti-music. I'd say letting your entire creative process be generated not by you is fundamentally different. I mean, like, you could even make the argument him flipping the coins. He's involved in that process. He's doing a thing. I think that is also that is human-made art. It looks different, but he had an idea. He went and he did it. He wrote it. He put it to music.
Yeah. What do you think about humans using AI as like merely an aid for helping them make music? As in, you have the idea you want to convey. You might even have like a lot of musical talent in order to translate that, but you use AI to like polish it or fill in some of the gaps.
Well, like, aid how is what I get. At some point, I don't see why that's necessary.
Okay.
You know, because we have a lot of really, really good, like, production technology.
Yeah.
What type of aid are you specifically talking about would be my question.
I don't have music composing terminology.
Yeah.
But like, say that we're coding something.
Yeah.
And we have the scaffold for a code, but we can't figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
And we ask AI how to make the code work, and it can produce a finished process.
Okay, code's really different from music.
Well, yeah.
But the reason I have an issue with that is because I have no problem with finishing AI to write code, because I consider code is about the end result, for me at least. You're building a thing to do a thing.
Yeah.
If you get it to do the thing, that's fine. it's like an industrial. I think of code more as an industrial process. Now, maybe some computer scientists will disagree with me. Some of the more mathematically minded, like philosophical ones, will be like, "No, it's art." I like coding. You like coding, see? But I think they're very different. My code does not ordinarily express an emotion unless it's a piece of code that's being like a piece of art or a game.
Yeah.
So those are, I think, fundamentally different things. But I don't. It would have to be a really, really like unique thing that you would have to convince me that only AI could do, and not any other form could do it for me to like even consider saying, yeah, this is fine. Like I'll give an example from video games since we were talking about them earlier. The one case where I've come across recently where I might be okay with the usage of AI in a form of art, because I thought this was kind of interesting, is someone had an idea that you could design a boss in a video game to learn from the player.
Oh.
So as you're learning the boss's attack patterns, as you're learning how to fight it, as you're learning strategies, the boss is also learning how you play, how you mess up, what patterns you engage in, and then it uses that to counteract you. I don't see how you could hard code that in any message, in any like meaningfully way. I don't see how you could make a decision tree to do that. I don't see how a human could reasonably ever be expected to code that. I think that's an okay usage of AI because fundamentally you had the idea and it's a thing that you reasonably cannot do in any other way. I think that's chill. My problem is mainly when you use an AI to generate something, there are going to be things in there that you don't really get to consider, if that makes sense, and that didn't come from you. Now, obviously, in the creative process, there are going to be things that didn't come from you anyway. You're some collective of things you like and enjoy, and you slip a bunch of them subconsciously in there. Yeah. But if you slip them subconsciously in there, that still kind of says something about you. In a way where if an AI slips something in there, it doesn't actually say anything about you or what you
says about the thing that it ended up like.
It says about the thing that it web scraped from.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
Last super fun question.
Okay.
This one may take a while because
Yeah.
I think you can go on a lot of info about this.
Yeah.
And this is one I just came up with on the spot.
Yeah.
So, as your neighbor, I know that the music that you listen to is completely different than the music that you play.
As
Correct.
someone who also enjoys the music that you listen to, I know it's very different than the music you play.
So, I want you to talk about, first of all, how you reconcile those two worlds, which
Yeah.
are quite different.
Mm-hmm.
About how you view the concert going experience, because this quarter we've been going to a lot of like more classical concerts, but also concerts that have been oftentimes more modern in a lot of ways. Like we went to a really modern opera. We also went to like Ottoman Empire music, which was more classical, but it was like classical of that geographic and like time space. Yeah, so basically talk about your concert going experience, because I know that you have a lot of concert going
Ephraim
experience.
can also chime in. Ephraim came with me to the last concert I went to.
Yeah.
So basically, I want you to talk about your personal music tastes and how you reconcile those two worlds.
Okay. Interesting question. I'm gonna have to think about this for a hot second, but I'll start
Go
talking.
for it.
A lot of the reason I started playing classical guitar was, and I'll be fully honest here, my parents made me do it.
Yeah.
As I've gotten older, I've come to like it for a few reasons, which is classical guitar of all music, I especially like playing it because it's something you can just go and make music on your own. One of the reasons I think I never really got into playing like electric as much is because if I'm going to perform an electric, I kind of need an accompaniment of some form. I need like a drummer, I need a bassist, I need a backing track. That's an extra level of difficulty. As a classical guitarist, if I want to go perform somewhere, I just grab my guitar and I go. It's that easy. And I really like performing. So that's one of the reasons I've stuck with classical. The thing I love most about going to concerts is that you get to listen to music, and this is going to sound weird. It's not the music that matters as much to me as you're doing it with other people.
Yeah.
I view all concerts generally as a social experience, and this is why I like stand-up concerts more than sit-down concerts generally, because I mean, half the fun I have is like talking to other people at the concerts, but also, you know, dancing, feeling the music with other people. It's a different way of experiencing music.
Yeah.
And I don't enjoy sit-down concerts as much because I feel like I can kind of just do that on my phone anytime. But I feel like if I go to a concert, then I can get a lot more out of it because I can see how other people respond to the music. I can engage with other people. I can, importantly, I mean, this just tickles the serotonin part of my brain. Moving in unison with other people to a beat, that hits so nice. That hits so nice.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say other than that. And that's one of the reasons I really like the type of music you were alluding to. I listen to a lot of metal, a lot of punk, EDM sometimes. also hyperpop, but that's a little different to talk about. And all of these genres have really fun concert-going experiences.
Yeah.
Where you can just feel like a nice sense of community. You can talk with other people. You can dance with other people. You can engage with other people.
Be a groupie for other people.
You can be a groupie for other people.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
I'm such a fan of Scarlett D'Amour. I'm gonna rep local Chicago band Scarlett D'Amour. Very good indie band. I wouldn't call myself a groupie, but I do go to a lot of their shows.
I also do love Scarlett D'Amour. And I was going to say, in the concerts that you perform at, like classical concerts, versus the concert I went to, which was a Scarlett D'Amour punk show, the concert going experience would be very different. Because that's like a nice event, you probably wear nice clothes, it's a sit-down event.
Well, I wear nice clothes to my punk concerts.
Yeah, well, when you're at the punk concert, there's like a big mosh pit. The focus is not just on the music, but about like being in the environment. Like the moving in unison. Which, I mean, different strokes for different folks. But that is a huge part about like modern music in general, as opposed to the traditional idea of Western art music, which is that music is meant to be enjoyed for the music. And it's like an event rather.
I usually stitch it together in post.
Yeah, that's good.
Stitch it in post.
Did it get saved somewhere?
Yeah, it got saved.
Okay.
Alright,
Which is the experience from a punk concert is different than the experience of a Western art music performance, where the music is the focal point of the experience. And we actually learned about opera.
Which was a musical experience for like
the social aspect. Yeah.
For at least a really long while.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's ever been one singular like idea of how music is supposed to be enjoyed.
No, that's what's so great about it. You can get so many different interpretations. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Well, I think that's all of the questions we have for you today.
Any final words?
Support your local musicians. Go out, listen to music, have fun.
Okay, great. Thank you for being on, Anthony.
Yeah, thank you
My
so much
pleasure.
for coming on.